Hi, I'm Sushil Mehta from Networkers Home technical team, and today we are having live session on fundamentals of firewall. This is one of the most important topic for the freshers in a job perspective. So let's have the live session on our fundamentals of firewall. What is firewall? This is our main agenda. We'll see the agendas of our live session. We'll see what is firewall, different vendors of firewall, types of firewalls, Gartner magic report, stateless firewall, stateful firewall, and next generation firewall. So these are the total agendas that we are going to discuss today. Now, the first thing, what is firewall? Whenever you go for an interview, the first thing as a fresher, they will ask you such type of questions like, what is firewall? Okay. So firewall is nothing but it's a security device, or it's a cyber security tool that we use for the traffic monitoring purpose, or for the permitting purpose, or for the blocking purpose. So basically we create a set of rules on our firewall to block the traffics for the outgoing traffic, or for the incoming traffic, or for our server access, or for any type of traffic control for between our networks. So we have different types of networks, right?
So, excuse me, sir. So,
Yes.
what exactly a firewall does? Can you please give us a brief explanation regarding this?
Yes. See, firewall is a security device that does a traffic filtering. Traffic filtering means, let's say, for example, this is a firewall between our internal network. This is a part of where you see we have an internal network. This you can take in a part of internal network. This is our external network, and this is our DMZ network, right? So in between this insecure network and the secure networks, we need a filtering device. We need a device that can filter the traffic. Now, if I give you an example of, let's say router, if I have a router instead of a firewall, then that router can't have a traffic filtering mechanism by default. Okay. But when I talk about the firewall, a firewall is a device which has by default a mechanism which does a traffic filtering between your secure and unsecure networks. So basically, we can have the secure networks like the internal network. We have the unsecure network like outside network. We have our secure zones wherein we deploy our servers and all. So between all these zones, we need a device which helps you to filter the traffic in the sense unwanted traffics, the traffic that should not come from the internet directly to your internal network, or it should not directly enter to your servers. Such type of filtering device is basically called as a firewall, which does a filtering by default based on the different mechanisms. As I told you, it's a network traffic. It does a network traffic filtering, right? It permits or blocks the data packets on the set of cybersecurity rules that we deploy on our firewall, right?
Yeah.
So
So,
it's
sir, where exactly the firewall can be deployed?
okay, right. See, when I talk about the firewall, so my question would be, where do you deploy a router? We deploy a router in between our different subnets or our different networks, right? Exactly same way, we deploy the firewall as a edge device between our different networks. Like we have an internal network. As I told you, we have a private network, we have a public network, right? We have our DMG servers. So between our private and the public network, the edge device, the main device which will be deployed between the public and the private network, that device is basically called as a firewall. Okay, so we basically deploy it between our trusted and the untrusted network. This is the exact place where we deploy the firewall. So this is how you should tell about the firewalls. Okay, Now let's move to our next topic. Now the next topic is like, what are the different vendors or the different firewalls that we have in our real time? So you guys can see there are multiple firewalls in our network. There are different vendors, like we have a Cisco, we have a Palo Alto, right? We have a Checkpoint firewall, we have a FortiGate firewall. Like this, we have multiple other firewalls, like we have a Sophos firewall, Barracuda. We have multiple firewalls.
So, sir, then in the current market, which firewall do you suggest as the best one?
Okay, very good question. So Manish, I would like to tell you here, like we have a different firewalls in a market, right? So out of that, if I suggest you the best firewall, then I would give you a reference of the Gartner Magic. So here you can see there is a Gartner Magic report, and Gartner Magic is one of a vendor, you can say, who basically gives you a quarterly report of all the network security devices. Like we have the firewalls, we have other security devices. Like for that, it gives a quarterly report, like which are the best performing firewalls in a market. So currently I have a report of 2021 August, and here you can see like the leader firewalls, challenger firewalls, niche players. So out of this, you can see what are the best firewalls in a market. You can see Palo Alto, Fortinet, Checkpoint, Cisco. These are the four firewalls that I would suggest you, that are the four leading firewalls in a market as of now. Cisco has slightly come out from the leaders to a challengers groups, but it is again coming back to a leaders group. See, that depends on the market also. Sometimes Palo Alto will be down, Fortinet will be up, sometimes Checkpoint will be up. That depends based on the performance and the new features that they introduce in the market. Based on that also, sometimes evaluation happens. But if you see, if you ask me in my perspective, what are the four best firewalls in a job perspective of a market, then I would suggest you like Cisco firewalls, Palo Alto firewall, Fortinet firewall, and the Checkpoint firewall. These are the four best firewalls which are very good in a market. And if you know the technology on all these firewalls, you'll be like a hot cake in a market. So companies are looking for such guys who have the multi-vendor knowledge. Okay, so I believe this gives you a clear knowledge.
Yeah. So basically, if as a fresher, I should be able have the knowledge of all these firewalls, right?
Yeah, if you have the knowledge on these firewalls, that would give you a good opportunities actually. Okay,
Thank you, sir.
so yeah, so let's look into another topic now. See, when I talk about different types of firewalls, generally what happens in a market, you have a different types of, questions. So what type of firewalls do I have? Tell me the types of firewalls. Simply when you go for a Google and check it out, types of firewalls, you'll see different ways of explaining the types of firewalls. So basically we get confused. How do I explain the types of firewalls? So I would give you a best method to discuss or to know what are the types of firewalls. Okay. So basically there are two types of major firewalling method that you can say. We have one host based firewall and the other as a network based firewall. So now you might be thinking, what is host based firewall? See, host based firewall is like, I have a PC. Currently everyone is having a PC, right? So let's say in my host, in my PC, in my laptop, I have a software based firewall, which basically protects your operating system, right? That is a kind of a host based firewall. Like that will be fixed inside your operating system, or that will be in your endpoint device, right? But your host based firewall will protect only your system. It won't protect the entire network. It's a single security system, you can say, that protects your endpoint itself. Okay, but in our network we have multiple hosts, we have hundreds of users, right? So we need a device that can protect our entire network. So if I see entire network security perspective, then I would suggest you have to go for the network based firewall. Okay, we can't do a network protection based on the host based firewall. So we need a network based firewall. So now when I talk about the network based firewall, in that we have basically two types. We have one hardware based, another as a software based. So hardware based is like a chassis box, which has, it's a hardware chassis box, right? Like you have your CPU, right? That's your hardware, right? Inside that we install the operating systems. We already have the operating systems. The same way, we have a hardware in which we'll have a pre-installed operating system of your firewall, okay? And another, we have a software based firewall. Software based firewall is like you have a software that has to be deployed somewhere, okay? Compared to a hardware and the software based firewall, uh, basically the prices difference will be there. Basically, when I talk about the hardware based firewall, we need a hardware component, so the price of a hardware is higher than the software based firewall, right?
So, sir,
Software, yeah.
then consider like I'm a small company with around hundreds of employees. That's it, and I don't have the budget to go with the hardware. So I have a server. So in this case of situation, what can I do?
Well, in this case of situation, I would suggest you go with software based firewall. Okay, software based firewall is the best solution, which can reduce your cost as well, and you can deploy it in your existing servers also. Like you have a servers like uh, we can have a Dell servers, we can have a HP servers, we can have a Cisco UCS servers. So whatever types of servers we can have rack mounted servers, or we can have towers, right? Wherein you can deploy these software firewalls, okay, and you can do a network protection. Also, we can use it for the client protections or multiple purposes. So basically, if I tell you a difference between the hardware and the software, yeah, we do have a differences. There are few features that might only support with the hardware. There are few features that might not support with the software. But overall, whatever the software firewall does, same thing your hardware based firewall also does, right? But some features would be there that might not work on your software based, but might work on your hardware based. So currently, if you see a market strategy, the vendors are producing both the types of firewalls, looking at the budget also. So budget based firewall, if you see, I would suggest you for the software based firewall. Okay, so if you have any dedicated server with you inside your premises, and on that, if you want to deploy the software based firewalls, we can do that. Okay, so I'll show you the examples. If you would like to see, I will show you a few examples where you can deploy such type of firewalls. Okay, now coming to hardware or the software based firewalls, again, the branches comes under these firewalls. You can see here, like we have a stateless firewall, we have a stateful firewall, we have a next generation firewall. So these are the types of firewalls, okay, which we basically get in a market. Okay, it's not like a traditional firewalls.
Sir, what are the difference? What is a stateless, stateful, or a next generation? Why do we have a three kinds of firewall over here?
Right. Okay, I'll tell you about it. See, it's not about only the stateless, stateful, or the next generation firewall. If you see, if you go for a Google and if you search the types of firewalls, again with the hardware or the software, based on features, you can get multiple firewalls. You will see multiple explanations. Like some might say application firewall, some might say proxy based firewall. Okay, but overall, if you see, we can categorize them based on the stateless firewall, stateful firewall, and next generation firewall. These are the major three topics that I would like to explain you. Okay, so let us see what are these three types of firewalls. Okay, before I explain you about the types of firewalls, okay, before I explain you about the stateless, stateful, or the next generation, I would like to show you about the hardware based firewall and the software based firewall deployment. Okay, so give me some time. I'll explain about the stateless, stateful, and the next generation as well. Okay, so see, hardware based firewall, you can see like here I have one chassis box. This is a kind of a chassis box, a kind of a hardware. Okay, inside which you'll have an inbuilt operating system. You don't have to deploy any extra software. Okay, so it's an inbuilt firewall which is basically deployed between your LAN and the WAN network. See, LAN and WAN are the terms that we use for our private network and the public network. So this is called hardware based firewall deployment. So we have a hardware in which we have a multiple interfaces. These interfaces will be connecting to our LAN and to our WAN, and in between your firewall will do a filtering based on the policies that we deploy. So this is called hardware based firewall. And another, we have a software based firewall. Now, how do we deploy this software based firewall? That's one of the big question. Okay, so you see here, as you asked me a question, like I have a server, can I deploy the software based firewall on the server? Your answer is here. You can see, like I have a UCS server. This is one of the hardware. You can see this is one of the hardware of a Cisco company called as a Cisco UCS server. Okay, on this Cisco UCS server, on this hardware, I have installed one operating system called as a ESXi operating system. ESXi is an operating system for the virtualization purpose, basically used only for the virtualization purpose. Okay, so like you have the Windows operating system, and you have the Linux, Mac, different type of operating systems for multiple tasking, right? The same way, we have an ESXi operating system, or you can have NSX operating system. Like that, we have multiple virtualized operating systems that we can install on top of our hardware. Okay, and
So
these
if,
hardwares,
sir, if
yes.
there are multiple OSs, which one would you suggest to go with in case if you are deploying the software devices?
See, that depends. That depends on the company also what they prefer. Mostly, what I see, I would prefer with ESXi, or I would prefer with NSX operating system. This ESXi or NSX is a part of VMware. So VMware has an operating system, and that operating system is called ESXi. Like you have a Microsoft, you have a Windows 10, Windows 11 as an operating system, right? Same way, VMware has its own virtualizing operating system that is called ESXi. So mainly in a real time, in a deployment perspective, if you ask me, we can't go for Windows or Linux or such type of operating systems. They are not the dedicated virtualization operating systems. So we have a dedicated operating system called as a ESXi operating system. This is one of the operating system that I would prefer. Okay.
Sure, sir. Thank
Uh,
you.
yeah. In We have a device called as a Cisco UCS server. You can take it like a hardware. Okay. On the hardware, we have one operating system installed. Inside this operating system, you get a virtualized switch, vSwitch, which has pre-created inside that operating system, which helps you to segregate the multiple machines that you deploy inside your server. So it's a kind of a dedicated operating system, which gives you multiple abilities for segregating the traffic or deploying the firewalls or different devices. Like on this platform, I can deploy a firewalls like FTD firewall, Palo Alto firewall, ASA firewall. So multiple firewalls at a time I can deploy on a one single server. Such type of deployment is basically for the software-based firewalls. So am I clear with software-based firewall? How can we deploy? Where can we deploy?
Yes, sir. Got it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So let's move to next topic now. Now, here we have something called as a stateful firewall and a stateless firewall. As earlier you asked me a question about what is stateless firewall, stateful firewall, and the next generation firewall, right? So
Yes,
let's
sir.
have a discussion on it. See, you can take a best example like a Cisco router. Okay, I'm giving an example of a stateless firewall currently. You can take an example of, we have a Cisco router, and that Cisco router has rules created like ACLs. We have an explicit rule created on the router. We call it as a ACL. So whenever we pass any traffic through the router, right, we go from LAN to WAN. So in between, we have a rule as a ACL to filter the traffic. We don't have any default feature inside the router that by default filters the traffic between your WAN to LAN or LAN to WAN. We don't have such type of rules. We have an explicit rule. ACL is a kind of a access control list. We call it as an access control list, a kind of a rule that user defines to block the traffic based on your source IP, destination IP, port numbers, etc. that we define. Okay, it does not have any type of predefined a type of a connection inside the device that will help to filter the traffic. Okay, so we have a kind of a explicit rule, a rule defined by us to filter the traffic based on the particular parameters. That is basically called as a stateless firewall. Now, when it comes to a stateful firewall, in a stateful firewall, you guys can see here I have shown one state table. What is this state table? See, whenever our internal employees tries to get an access to our internet, by default, one table will be created inside the stateful firewall. Okay, one table gets created automatically. And based on this table, your reply coming from the outside will be filtered. So automatically it does a filter. I don't need any type of explicit rule to define on the firewall, right? On the stateful firewall, I don't need any kind of explicit rule to identify or to filter the traffic. So any connections passing through the firewall, it will have the state of that connection. We call it as a state table or connection table. And based on that connection table, your traffic will be filtered. Okay.
So can you give us any a live example regarding this stateless and stateful firewall?
Well, okay, I'll give you one of the example of a stateful firewall. What exactly does the stateful firewall look like? Okay, I'll give you one live example on it. So here I have taken one scenario wherein you can see I have an inside network. This is my inside network and this is my outside network. And in between, I have one of the firewall called as a FTD firewall, Cisco's Firepower Threat Defense. So between my internal and the external network, I have a live firewall. And what I'll try to do is I'll try to get an access from this PC to this particular device, ISP. Okay. And we'll see, is there any connection getting created on the firewall or not? So currently, if I take an access of the firewall, let's say this is a console of the firewall. Okay, on this firewall, if I say show connection, so right now you see there is no connection, there is nothing. I don't have any connections inside the firewall. Okay, now if I come to this particular PC and there is one remote accessing method called as a telnet. So if you belong to a networking background, you can understand what exactly a telnet is, one of the method of taking a remote access. So here I'm trying to take a remote access to 100.1.1.2. That's my ISP IP here. Okay. So if I take access, you can see it is prompting me for login and I got access to ISP. Now, if I come to a console of the firewall, I can see here show connection. And you can see here that one connection table has been created. I didn't create any rules, right? I didn't create any type of explicit rules. Automatically on the router, on the edge device, a device which is deployed between my internal and the external network, automatically you can see one traffic, one rule has been created. Rule in the sense, it's a type of a connection that has been created. And this is the main base based on which your returning traffic will get filtered. So if anyone from the outside will try to perform the attack, your firewall will try to filter the traffic based on this connection table. If this connection table is not present, your firewall will not allow the traffic. If the connection table is present, if the returning traffic comes from the external network to your internal network, it will try to verify your existing connection. If it matches, it will allow the traffic. If it does not matches, it will deny the traffic. So this is a kind of a live example of your stateful firewall.
Okay.
So
Basically, in a stateless firewall, we don't have this particular concept.
this type of, correct, we don't have such type of pre-created connection tables based on which it will filter the traffic, whether it's initiated from the outside or the reply is coming from outside. We don't have any verification mechanism. What we can do is we can have a ACL. We can have a ACL rules. That's it. Okay. Am I clear with this?
Yes, sir. Got it. Thank you.
All right. Now, the last thing today, what I would like to discuss is about what is our next generation firewall. See, till now we discussed about the firewalls. We discussed about different types of firewalls. Now here we have a next generation firewall. So next generation firewall is nothing but it's a firewall having the multiple features in a single device, in a single operating system. When we club the multiple features, like we have the features like a URL filtering, VPN, anti-bot, we have the firewall feature. Apart from the firewall feature, apart from the traffic filtering, if we have the bundles of features to clubbed together, such type of firewalling is called as a next generation firewall. Okay, like you can see, we have a data loss prevention, we have a sandboxing, threat prevention, we have an antivirus prevention, we have identity awareness, app control, anti-spam, right, intrusion prevention, IPS. What are all these features? See, earlier if I talk about 90s type of the time when we used to do a traffic filtering in our network, we used to have these separate devices, like for application filtering separate device, for reporting separate device, for intrusion prevention separate device. So lots of latencies were there in the market. So we had a different types of devices in a market, right? And we had to apply a multiple devices in a network to filter the traffic. But when I talk about today's age, we have a next generation firewalls like FTD firewall, checkpoint firewall, FortiGate firewall, we have a Palo Alto firewall. These are the types of firewalls which are next generation firewall, in which we have all inbuilt devices, inbuilt features. Okay, these are the inbuilt features which we get inside the firewall. Now that makes your firewall as a next generation firewall. Okay, so this is a best example.
Yeah, so nowadays there is nothing like a normal firewall or anything. Always about next generation firewall.
Yeah, we do have like one old firewall called as a Cisco ASA firewall. That's a stateful firewall, but not a next generation firewall. Okay, so I can give you an example, like all stateful firewalls can't be a next generation firewall, but all the next generation firewalls can be a stateful firewall. Okay, that's a best example that you can say. Like ASA firewall is not a next generation firewall, but it's a stateful firewall. But FTD firewall, firepower threat defense, is a stateful firewall plus a next generation firewall having all these types of features. So
thank you.
These were the total topics that we wanted to discuss. Hope this session would be helpful for you guys. Soon we'll come with the next session. Till then, take care. Thank you.